بريطانيا تحتفل اليوم بمرور أكثر من 100 عام على اندلاع الحرب العالمية الأولى، حرب يقال إنها غيرت خارطة العالم بأكمله، إذ أسفرت عن تفكك دول كبرى كالإمبراطورية العثمانية والنمساوية والألمانية، لكنها أسفرت في ذات الوقت عن ولادة دول جديدة لم يكن لها موطئ قدم على خارطة العالم السياسي من قبل. لكن دون قصة الولادة قصة أخرى عن مستشرقة بريطانية كان لها الأثر الأمضى في تشكيل أحد الدول المنسلخة عن الدولة العثمانية، العراق، الدولة الحديثة التي ظهرت في أعقاب الحرب العالمية الأولى، والتي أسهمت جيترود بيل في تأسيسها إبان عملها كمستشارة للحكومة البريطانية آنذاك. رحلة البحث عن جيترود هي رحلة تبحث في نشأة أكثر بلدان الشرق الأوسط اضطراباً، ففي فترة 8 عقود أو ينيف انتقلت مقاليد السلطة في هذا البلد من الملكية الدستورية إلى أحزاب اليسار، ومن ثم إلى الأحزاب القومية في 3 انقلابات عسكرية، أقل ما يقال إنها كانت دموية، ناهيك عن 3 حروب طاحنة بدأت إقليمية وانتهت بحرب شاركت فيها أكثر من 40 دولة تقودها الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية لتطيح بآخر حكومات هذا البلد، وتنتقل مقاليد السلطة إلى الأحزاب الدينية، وتدخل البلاد بعدها في أتون حرب أهلية ما زالت آثارها وتداعياتها تسيطر على المشهد العراقي بكل أطيافه. ودون مشهد الحاضر الممزق رحلة إلى الماضي في بواكير نشأة الدولة العراقية، لتبدأ قصة هذا البلد مع بداية من رسم حدوده الحديثة وتوج أول ملك عليه. إنها جيترود بيل أو خاتون بغداد كما يحلو للبعض تسميتها.
في منزل ضخم يعود لعائلة برجوازية في العصر الفيكتوري ولدت هنا جيرترود بيل، لكن هذا المنزل لم يكن سوى نقطة البداية لامرأة قادها الحلم والترحال إلى رحلة طويلة في شبه الجزيرة العربية ليستقر بها المطاف في بلاد الرافدين.
Well, she was born into a very wealthy family. Her grandfather was Isaac Lothian Bell, who was a famous British iron worker, iron industrialist. So he had pioneered iron making in northeast England and made a lot of money. Her grandfather and her father, they were very dynamic men. They had achieved great things in their lives, and I think in many ways she inherited much. She inherited not only their wealth, but also their intelligence and probably their drive.
She was born into a very rich family of sort of what we might say industrial bourgeois in the north of England. Family were very rich and had a lot of connections with people in government and so on.
She was one of the most powerful and influential people in that critical moment when the state of Iraq, the modern state of Iraq, was founded by the British with Iraqi assistance after the First World War.
لم تكن الحياة بما فيها من ثراء ونفوذ سهلة وسلسة على جيترود، ففي ربيعها الثالث تعرضت لانتكاسة كبيرة تركت أثرا فارقا في حياتها. يقول كتاب سيرتها الذاتية إنه سبب لها صدمة نفسية انعكست على تكوين شخصيتها بشكل ذوبات من الاكتئاب النفسي وحب جموح للمغامرة والأسفار، ناهيك عن تعلق مفرط بشخصية أبيها الذي كانت له الكلمة الأخيرة في قراراتها المصيرية.
Just a few weeks after her younger brother was born, her mother died, and so Gertrude grew up with her father, who was very dear to her, and her father later remarried.
في مقتبل العمر تلقت جيترود بيل تعليما خاصا في المنزل أسوة بأترابها من الأثرياء، ومن ثم انتظمت إلى مقاعد الدراسة في ثانوية كوينز كوليدج، فأظهرت تفوقا واضحا أهلها أن تكون من أوائل النساء اللاتي دخلن جامعة إكسفورد تدرس علمي التاريخ والآثار.
مع انتهاء الحياة الأكاديمية ابتدأ مشوار جيترود بيل في الحل والترحال، إذ كان بانتظارها أول رحلة استكشافية وأول قصة حب داعبت خيالها الغض في بلاد الشرق.
soon after she graduated, she was taken on a trip to Persia by a cousin whose, I believe it was her father, the cousin's father was the ambassador in Tehran, and she became infatuated with what she thought the romance, as she called it, of the East, you know. And she learned Persian. She also translated later she translated the poems of the great Persian poet Hafiz.
Originally, she began, rather like many other British people of the late 19th century, with a rather romantic idea of the East, as the East being a place which was unexplored as far as they were concerned, a place where honour still existed, a place where in many ways a pre-industrial life existed that had been lost in England. So interestingly, like many of her generation, she saw the Middle East in particular as a place untouched by modernity.
She has various love affairs with men. Early on, one of her chosen men, Henry Cadogan, her father forbids her from marrying. So we see in that case, she's sort of deferential to her father, and she obeys her father in not marrying a man who he considered was unsuitable, even though she had fallen in love with him.
ذهابها إلى إيران في عام 1990 ومعرفتها جدتها اللغة أنتجت لنا كتاب بيرشن فوتوز، يعني صور فارسية، أيضا عن صور جيدة في فترة مبكرة عن انطباعاتها وبعض لبلاد فارس في ذلك الوقت.
لم يطل المقام بجيرترود بيل في بلاد فارس لأكثر من 5 أعوام، إذ كانت تصوب ناظريها نحو شبه الجزيرة العربية وبلاد الشام وأرض الرافدين، لما فيها من حضارات قديمة تمثل مادة خصبة لأبحاثها الآثارية. سجلت جيرترود بيل مشاهداتها وانطباعاتها عن البلدان التي زارتها في المشرق العربي بقافلة مكونة من حراس وأد الله استأجرتهم، وعدد من الإبل التي اشترتها لتحمل كل ما كانت تحتاجه من عدة السفر، ناهيك عن آلة التصوير الفوتوغرافي التي رافقتها أينما حلت وارتحلت، لتوثق بالصورة والقلم مدوناتها اليومية بشكل رسائل، إذ يقدر عدد ما دونته من رسائل ومذكرات عن مشاهداتها وانطباعاتها اليومية بنحو 1600 رسالة، جمعت في 7 مجلدات و40 كتيبا و700 صورة فوتوغرافية. بين عامي 1900 حتى عام 1907 بلغ عدد رحلاتها إلى بلاد الشام نحو 12 رحلة، زارت فيها مدينة القدس ودمشق وبيروت وجبل الدروز وأنطاكيا، سجلت فيها ملاحظاتها عن بلاد الشام والقبائل العربية التي تعيش في صحراء الشام ومدنها وأريافها، في كتاب أطلقت عليه اسم الصحراء والكلاء، كتاب يقول النقاد إنه فتح مجاهل الصحراء العربية أمام الغرب، لما فيه من وصف دقيق موثق بالصور عن حياة العرب وأحوالهم، ما إن فرغت من كتابها هذا حتى شرعت برحلة استكشافية جديدة مع الباحث الآثاري ويليام رامسي، بحثا عن حضارات سوريا القديمة في أعالي حوض الفرات وجنوب الأناضول، خرجت فيه بكتاب آخر أسمته 1000 كنيسة وكنيسة، والتقت خلالها بمستكشف وضابط بريطاني يدعى تشارلز داوتي وايلي، رجل شكل منعطفا جديدا في حياتها بعد أن ارتبطت به بقصة حب كبيرة، وألهمها حب السفر إلى مجاهل شبه الجزيرة العربية التي كانت عصية على الكثير من المستشرقين، لما فيها من تناحر قبلي حاد بين حائل ونجد والحجاز، لكن الرحلة لم يكتب لها أن تكتمل بعد أن أصر أمير حائل على عودتها من حيث أتت، خوفا من لقائها بنده عبد العزيز آل سعود.
Later she started on a remarkable series of explorations in the Middle East to parts which no other English person, male or female, have been to. For example, she visited the court of the Hayil dynasty in northern Arabia, which was a very strange place and very violent, and a lot of violence between the family and so on. And she survived that.
She was fascinated by the traces of ancient civilizations, Roman, Greek, Byzantine, Islamic to some extent, in the Middle East. So she was there for two reasons. One was the idea that you could find in the Middle East ways of life that had long disappeared in Europe and that were somehow purer, cleaner, more direct. And the other was, of course, the traces of these great civilizations that have been built in the Middle East.
عام 1909 بدأت جيترود رحلة جديدة إلى بلاد الرافدين، قادتها إلى قرقميش والحضر وبابل والنجف، لتكون جيترود بيل بهذا أول من اكتشف حصن الأخيضر، وأول من وضع وصفاً دقيقاً لسكان العراق آنذاك في كتيب أسمته عرب بلاد الرافدين. كان هذا الكتاب كفيلاً بتغيير مسار حياتها فيما بعد من العمل الأكاديمي إلى نظيره الدبلوماسي.
And she wrote a general report just called the Arab of Mesopotamia, because we know they call it Mesopotamia. And that was a very, very good piece of reporting which explained things that I don't think the British understood. The British went into Iraq expecting to see lots of Bedouin, lots of Bedouin guys jumping about on camels and things. And of course it wasn't that sort of society, as was it? It was an agricultural society, basically. And the Arabs basically were peasants, and you had peasants and you had sheikhs who were landlords.
كتاب The Arabs of Mesopotamia نشر في عام 17 في البداية لم نذكر اسمه، ولكن هي اللي كتبته وأعطت معلومات يعني عن العراق وعن العشائر العراقية. في توصيف للوضع العراقي، العشائر العراقية، أصبح بجايد لاينز إلى القادة العسكريين. المناطق العراقية فيها توصيف، وهذا لعله من أوائل الكتب، صدرت بعدها مجموعة كتب، ولكن هو كان موجه إلى decision makers، إلى القادة البريطانيين، إلى كيفية التعامل. وربما هذا الكتاب مع الاستشارات الأخرى التي كانت تعطى حدث نجاح بريطاني كبير بعد عام 16 من هذه الهزيمة اللي حدثت في عام 16 في الكوت.
So she had quite a good reading of tribal structures, but of course one of the questions that emerged was that did she, like many British imperial agents, give too much credibility, too much weight to those tribal structures? So it was almost as if the whole of Mesopotamia was composed of tribesmen, and it was the tribal structures that were the key. So I think one of the interesting things, when you look at that book, it's much less explicit about the emerging middle class, about the urban metropolitan Iraqis that were living in Mesopotamia, much less well informed in many ways about the structures of Iraqi settled civilization.
في تلك الفترة كانت بريطانيا تخوض صراعاً خلف الكواليس مع الإمبراطورية الألمانية. بدأت بوادره تلوح على الضفاف الشرقية لمدينة البصرة حول مصدر جديد من مصادر القوة والنفوذ للسيطرة على العالم. النفط محور الصراع بين الدول الكبرى وإكسير الطاقة الذي يسير أساطيل الإمبراطورية الألمانية والبريطانية.
Geographical symptoms of oil deposits were discovered when the Germans were building the Berlin to Baghdad railway around about early 1900s. For example, Sir Mark Sykes, who is now better known for the infamous Sykes-Picot Treaty, was one of the people who actually did some intelligence work and produced maps of what the Germans were doing. But once this rivalry began over the oil, for a while it was quite intense, but then towards I think 1912, 1913, a kind of compromise was made, and a company was set up called the Turkish Petroleum Company, and it was formed. It was a sort of a joint enterprise between the Germans and the British. So I think the Germans, Deutsche Bank had 25% of the share capital, Shell had 25%. And the remaining 50% was owned by a rather vague sort of organisation called the Turkish National Bank, but it was actually owned largely by British capital. And then, in the meantime, Anglo-Persian, who were looking over the border and seeing what was going on in Iraq, became quite concerned. They didn't really want another British company. Any company sitting there, they wanted a monopoly, because you've got to remember that Anglo-Persian was partly nationalised, but only 51%. It was also a private company as well. And what they didn't want was somebody glutting the market with oil when they could make some money out of it.
I mean, the British were interested in Iraq for a number of reasons. Part of them was strategic, about the route to the Indian Empire, so it was about imperial strategy. And partly it was about this new resource that was emerging in that region, although not very obviously in Iraq, although it was possibly there, which was oil, and which had been discovered in Abadan and in the southwestern parts of Iran. So the idea, therefore, was that this resource would now become the fuel of the Royal Navy, which was the key imperial weapon. And if you were concerned about the security of the Royal Navy and the empire, you had to be concerned about the sources of oil. So Iran had become increasingly interesting to the British. And so when the idea of, thanks to the beginning of the First World War, the idea that the Germans, as the allies of the Ottoman Sultan Caliph, would become dominant in Mesopotamia, this was something that frightened the British on two levels. One was that they might make a move to seize the Persian oil fields militarily, and the other was it wasn't very comfortable to have the potential of German military installations, possibly even naval units, stationed at the head of the Gulf, which was the British regarded very much as their own territory.
لم يدم انتظار البريطانيين لفترة طويلة، إذ سرعان ما اندلعت شرارة الحرب العالمية الأولى في سراييفو، وسرعان ما انتقلت نيرانها إلى ثغور الدولة العثمانية، فباتت البصرة أول مسرح للمعارك بين الإمبراطورية البريطانية ونظيرتها العثمانية.
Oil refinery complex was actually on the island of Abadan, which was absolutely next door to Iraq. And so when the war broke out, the British invasion of southern Iraq in 1914 was really initially because of concerns that the Turks and the Germans would either invade, would capture the refinery, or possibly, and this was more likely, get into Persia and with the Arab allies there to capture the British oil operations in Persia.
Heaven, I'm in heaven, and my heart beats so that I can hardly speak, and I seem to find the
كانت جيترود آنذاك تعيش مرحلة وردية في غي حبها للضابط البريطاني تشارلز داوتي وايلي، لكنه كان حبا مستحيلا في ضوء ظروف داوتي وايلي وجيترود. سرعان ما انتهى بفاجعة مؤلمة في ربيع عام 1915.
She falls in love with a married man, and yet again that relationship is essentially impossible. They write letters to one another, but because he's married, it's impossible for them to take it any further. Doughty Wiley was killed at Gallipoli.
She was devastated by this, and she went to do some sort of war work. I think it was nursing or something like that. And then once the British had gone into Iraq, and of course the British were also fighting the Turks over the Egyptian border and so on, the High Command realised they needed somebody who really knew a real lot about Middle East, and particularly had the language skills. So they recruited her, and she was, if you like, in a state of unhappiness, personal, and it was a way out for her to get out of this psychological problem and do something practical for her country.
وبعيدا عن معارك الشمال على مشارف اسطنبول والنوائب التي ألمت بجيترود بيل، كانت نتائج الحرب تسير على ما يرام في الجبهة الجنوبية، إذ استغل البريطانيون تقهقر القوات العثمانية أمام جيوشهم التي تفوقت على العثمانيين في عدتها وعتادها وتنظيمها في البصرة والعمارة.
The Mesopotamian campaign was very successful at the beginning in the sense that the British captured the Fao Peninsula, Basra. They defeated the Ottoman Mesopotamian Arab armies at Shaiba, and then sat there. Their mistake was they thought that the success they'd had in the south could lead them to immediately capture Baghdad. So they marched on Baghdad with inadequate resources, inadequate troops, inadequate planning, and a huge amount of arrogance because they felt that somehow the Turkish forces against them would collapse.
لكن حسابات الحقل خالفت حسابات البيتر هذه المرة بعد أن ابتعد البريطانيون مئات الأميال عن خطوط إمداداتهم العسكرية في البصرة والعمارة.
في عام 15-16 يعني في نهاية 15 كانت تحرك الجيش البريطاني إلى جنوب بغداد في قيصفون بقيادة تاوزند، وحدث انكفاء وخسارة الجيش البريطاني، ثم تراجع إلى الكوت وحدث ما يسمى بحصار الكوت في نهاية يعني في ديسمبر 15، وتم التسليم وأكثر من 10,000 جندي استسلم للقطاعات العثمانية في أبريل 30 نيسان 16.
And as a result, it led to one of the greatest disasters of the British suffered during the First World War, which was the siege of Kut, and the loss of a whole army, which the British could never rescue.
انتهى حصار الكوت باستسلام القوات البريطانية، لكن بريطانيا قررت أن ترمي بثقلها العسكري في المعركة المقبلة، فبدأت تعد العدة لهذا الأمر. وكانت جيترود بيل آنذاك من ضمن من قرر المكتب العربي إرسالهم إلى ميدان المعركة، لكن هذه المرة بمنصب رسمي، وضابط ارتباط مهمتها التنسيق بين القوات البريطانية والمكتب العربي في القاهرة في ربيع عام 1916. فكانت جيترود بيل بهذا المنصب أول امرأة تدخل الخدمة في القوات البريطانية كضابط سياسي.
The British got their act together in 1917 and really reinforced it, put a competent general, General Maude, in power, in charge of it, that they began the rather slow, but nevertheless eventually successful campaign to capture Baghdad. So it was a curious tale of British military incompetence and then slow, methodical military success.
إثر دخول القوات البريطانية إلى بغداد، رقيت جيترود بيل لتصبح سكرتيرة لشؤون الشرق ضمن طاقم الحاكم البريطاني للعراق بيرسي كوكس، وذلك للإفادة من لغتها وخبراتها في العراق. وما هو إلا عام واحد بعد دخول القوات البريطانية إلى بغداد حتى تمكنت بريطانيا من بسط نفوذها على ولاية الموصل وكردستان ولواء الدليم، لتنتهي لعبة العسكر وتبدأ لعبة السياسة. عام 1919 أكلت إلى جيترود مهمة إجراء تقييم لرسم حدود العراق الحديث، ناهيك عن مهمة لعب الوسيط بين البريطانيين والسكان المحليين من شيوخ العشائر ورجال الدين وموظفين سابقين في الدولة العثمانية وغيرهم من الشخصيات النافذة في البلاد، والتي دونتها في عمل أكاديمي استغرق إعداده 10 أشهر، عرفت فيما بعد بوثيقة تقرير مصير بلاد الرافدين. لكن دوام الحال كان من المحال، إذ سرعان ما انتهت العلاقة الوردية بين السكان المحليين والبريطانيين.
إثر انتهاء الحملة العسكرية على البلاد، غيرت بريطانيا استراتيجيتها العسكرية في البلاد، إذ استبدلت قواتها البرية الكبيرة المتواجدة في البلاد بأسطول ضخم من الطائرات تحسباً لما هو آت.
And one of the features that becomes apparent was when the British first went there, they discounted everything that the Ottoman Iraqis had ever done. So it was almost as if they were going to pretend to start afresh, anew. And I think that's what many Iraqis really resented, this notion that here were these people coming in who were going to govern them like a colony, who didn't give any value to their own political, educational experience, but said, as it were, that we're going to start from the beginning and we're going to run you with British and Indian civil servants. And in many senses that contributed to the Iraqi revolt or revolution of 1920.
There was a number of very irritating things. For example, the population had to accept the billeting of British troops in their houses, and that was very unpopular. It was supposed to finish when the war ended, but it was continued. That was very unpopular. And of course, out in the countryside, things were quite completely different. In the countryside, the British installed forced labour, building railways, and they were beginning already to bomb tribes who were not paying the taxes. So in the countryside, and particularly in the Shia areas.
كانت تجربة الإنجليز بعد 7 سنين من حملتهم العسكرية على العراق تجربة قاسية، إذ لم تمن قواتهم بهذا الكم من الخسائر المادية التي أنهكت الخزينة البريطانية في الوقت الذي دخلت فيه معظم الدول الأوروبية مرحلة تقشف اقتصادي صارم. فارتأت بريطانيا استبدال العصا العسكرية بجزارة السياسة علها تصلح ما أفسده العسكر.
Gertrude Bell did feel that direct rule was the answer. This would bring all the benefits of modern life to Iraq and so on. But interestingly, by the time you get to 1919, 1920, she's much more in favour of Iraqi self-rule, but of course with under British control. And some would argue that's because she became much more persuaded of the force of Arab nationalism and believed therefore that Arab nationalism was a modernizing movement, that it would transform Iraq. And so when the 1920 revolution took place, it discredited all the people in the British administration who had believed that it should be ruled directly as a colony, and persuaded people like Winston Churchill and others to believe Gertrude Bell and those who had begun to say that Iraqis should rule Iraq under British control.
There were 3 schools actually, and it's important to remember the first one, which was British public opinion, as expressed, let's say, from the, at least middle class opinion, as expressed through the Times newspaper, and they did not want Britain to stay in Iraq at all. Why? Because it was considered to be a waste of money. This was a time of financial crisis after the war. There was unemployment, very big industrial unrest. The public opinion, and certainly the Times newspaper, which after all is a sort of establishment newspaper, was very, very much opposed to Britain being there at all.
كانت هناك هذه المدرسة اللي هي أقرب إلى المدرسة الهندية في التعامل بشكل مباشر، يعني حكم عسكري مباشر، وأن الإدارة البريطانية المتمثلة يعني بمفوضية بريطانيا أو الحكومة البريطانية هي قادرة على التعامل، ولكن هذه الأحداث أثبتت لاحقا أنه تحولوا إلى المدرسة كما قلنا، يعني المكتب العربي الذي كان بتي لورنس، والمسبال أيضا هي من رواد يعني.
إثر اندلاع ثورة العشرين أعيد الحاكم المدني بيرسي كوكس ثانية إلى بغداد، وطلب إلى جيترود أن تلعب دور المنسق بين البريطانيين والحكومة الجديدة المزمع تشكيلها في بغداد، وإجراء عملية تقييم لاختيار شكل من أشكال حكم البلاد.
It had dismissed everyone from the army, it dissolved the army. This all sounds quite familiar for a modern era. They had dismissed people from the civil service. They had effectively treated the Iraqis as a subject people. And of course, people resented it on lots of different levels. So when you look at the 1920 revolution, it's not made up of one movement. It's actually made up of lots of different movements of Iraqis, whatever background they came from, who found themselves equally excluded from this new order. And it had a huge impact on the way the British then went on to rule Iraq.
They wanted to hang on to Iraq, but they wanted to hang on to it as what they called a friendly native state. That was the phrase they often used. Rather derogatory in a way, but it was the idea was that, you know, there would be a new Iraq. It would have some kind of independence, but not a lot. And the British, it would protect British interests in the oil industry indirectly, if you like, by having friendly people in government.
بدأت نوع من الاحتكاكات ما بين العراقيين، ما بين بعض الشيوخ العساكر الذي يريد أيضا يأخذ سلطته، سواء كان يعني لسبب إيجابي أو لسبب وطني أو لسبب سلطة يريد. هذه أدت إلى هذه الاحتكاكات، لذلك كان البريطانيين شافوا حل بأنه أن يكون هناك نوع من يعني الحكومة العراقية بدل ما أنه يديرها بنفسه.
عام 1921 أوعز وزير الحربية البريطاني وينستون تشرشل آنذاك بتشكيل هيئة ثلاثية تضم الحاكم المدني بيرسي كوكس وجيترود بيل وتي لورنس. أوكل إليهم مهمة البحث عن شكل من أشكال حكم العراق، تضمن للإنجليز مصالحهم وتؤمن البلاد من التيارات الدينية والعرقية التي تعصف بحدوده وتركيبته السكانية.
A series of assessments, because one of the things that the British had to try and find out was that if they went ahead with indirect rule, that is with Iraqis governing themselves, which Iraqis was the key question. So she and others, it must be said, she wasn't acting on her own, had to go around and make assessments of the people they encountered. And one of the things that becomes very apparent in the way that Gertrude Bell went about it was that she favoured two kinds of social grouping, and some have argued that this has a huge impact on how Iraq then developed. When she went around, what she favoured were the tribal sheikhs, but generally the Sunni tribal sheikhs, or at least tribal sheikhs who didn't seem to owe any particular religious allegiance. She was much more mistrustful of the sheikhs of the Shia tribes of the mid-Euphrates. She had seen them as the heart of the rebellion. She'd seen them as led astray by the ayatollahs, by the clerics of Najaf and Karbala.
لم تكن رؤية البريطانيين في تفضيل العرب السنة عن سواهم ناجمة عن كبرياء أو هوى، بل كانت حصيلة تجربة قاسية خاضوا غمارها في إيران عام 1908، ذلك العام الذي ارتبط بثورة التتم والتنباك، حيث قاطع الإيرانيون صناعة التبغ البريطانية في إيران سعيا لضرب مصالح الإنجليز الاقتصادية وإخراجهم من البلاد بفتوى من المجتهد الأكبر محمد الشيرازي.
A number of developments in Persia which were very, very important. The Persian so-called constitutional revolution of 1905, which then was eventually ended in a civil war. But during that period, the clerics, or the ulama of Karbala and Najaf and the other shrine cities, many of whom were actually of Persian origin anyway, they became very politicized. They were very influenced by what happened in Persia, and were very disturbed by the way in which Persia was effectively dismembered by the Russians and the British, who had decided on territories of control in 1907. And so the what you might call the Mujtahideen fraternity in the holy cities, the Shia holy cities, were already very worried about what you might call encroaching imperialism, if that's the best word to use. And the tobacco boycott and so on, which had happened earlier on, was probably part of that general movement which persuaded the Shi'i leaders, the religious leaders, to have a favourable view ultimately towards revolution.
I think that what was happening in Iran, or in Persia as it was called at the time, and the British experience there had an influence on how they read Iraqi and Iraqi society. And one of the instances that they feared was the influence of, you could argue, the transnational clerics of the Shia. That is, the axis between Qom, Najaf, Karbala. And so one of the things that people like Gertrude Bell feared was that the clerics of Najaf and Karbala and of Kazimiya and so on would always be taking, as she put it, their orders from Persia, and that therefore their loyalty and their focus of attention would always be across the border in Persia. They wouldn't think about the state of Iraq as something to construct. So when she was looking around for people who would join in this venture of creating the state of Iraq, she rather dismissed them.
وبصرف النظر عن التأثيرات الخارجية لرجال الدين في قيام ثورة العشرين، إلا أن العراقيين قرروا أن يوحدوا صفوفهم في إقليم كردستان ولواء الدليم وجنوب العراق والفرات الأوسط للوقوف بوجه القوات البريطانية وعلى نحو مفاجئ.
I think the 1920 revolution in Iraq came for a whole series of reasons that took the British completely by surprise. But when you look back on it, you can see why Iraqis of all kinds rebelled. And whether they were the old Ottoman officers, whether they were the people of the north, whether they were the Kurds, whether they were the clerics of Najaf and Karbala and the tribal sheikhs of the south, they were resenting, I suppose, two things. One was the notion of direct rule by Great Britain. They did not want to be part of the British Empire. And therefore, in a sense, they were fighting against what they saw as imperialism. but they were also fighting against a kind of arrogance which had pushed them all out of the way.
Churchill intervened. Churchill was sympathetic to Gertrude Bell, he knew her personally, and he also, you see, the other thing about the second option, the one of the Indian control, and so it was going to be very expensive, you know. So he was also charged with reducing expenditure in the Middle East, and he thought this was the cheaper option. So he supported the, shall we say, slightly more progressive tendency in this discussion, and eventually there was a big conference in Cairo. I think this took place just after the crushing of the revolution.
هناك رأي هل نختار عبد الله مثلا أم فيصل يعني. فكان في لورنس مثلا أن العراق يعني بحكم يعني أكثر تعقيدا يعني من الأردن بلد أقرب يعني البساطة، والعراق يحتاج شخصية ذكية جدا مثل الملك مثل فيصل يعني أمير فيصل. لذلك كان رأيي أنه فيصل هو الأنسب للعراق من أخيه عبد الله، أن عبد الله يعني لم يكن نشطا وذكيا مثل ذكاء الملك فيصل، وهذا هو الرأي الأصح يعني. أيضا عندما جاء هنا دور مسبل، عندما المسبل تود الملك فيصل جدا وتعتبره شخصا ذكيا يعني، هي وتشير دائما أنه في كل كتاباتها ورسائلها أنه لم أجد ما يعني كلمة جارحة أو سيئة بحقه يعني.
إثر اختتام مؤتمر القاهرة بات جليا أن بريطانيا حسمت أمرها على اختيار فيصل بن الحسين ملكا على العراق. تبدأ جيترود بعد ذلك صفحة جديدة في عملها كمنسقة بين السفارة البريطانية في العراق والميلاط الملكي ببغداد، مهمة لم تكن الموازنة فيها سهلة بين ملك يحاول أن يثبت أنه صاحب القول الفصل في المملكة وإمبراطورية نصبت هذا الملك على المملكة.
Gertrude Bell's relationship with Faisal was both a personal and a political relationship. So on the political side, she saw him as somebody who might be able to unify the Iraqis in the sense that he was a Sunni Arab and therefore respected from a tribal heritage by the tribal sheikhs of Iraq. He was also of the family of the Prophet and therefore, in a sense, she thought might be respected by the Shia of Iraq as well. But the point is, he was also had a great advantage that he wasn't from Iraq. And so one of the fears of any of the potential candidates to rule Iraq as king or as figurehead of the state itself was that if you appointed one, you'd immediately alienate whole other sections of Iraqi society, which was not wrong. I mean, in the sense that could happen, but they were perhaps too optimistic in thinking about the traditional pulling power of a Hashemite monarch. But the other side of Faisal politically that she saw him as a symbol of Arab nationalism.
She clearly favoured some kind of representation by the people of Iraq. But the problem was that the sort of people she wanted to see running the country reflected very much her own upper-class British prejudices. So, you know, anybody who was suitable had to be a fairly rich person, a sheikh of some high degree, you know, or a military officer. She had little interest in what we might call democratic politics.
كانت هي مستشارة وقريبة وتذهب معها في سفراتي فبهذه الطريقة يعني الفرندلي يعني كانت يعني مثل ما نقول يعني توصل رسائلها وتوصل استشارتها بطريقة أو بأخرى حتى أصبحت أنه من يكون في منصب أقرب يعني من يتعين من يذهب، فكانت الكون هي قريبة الأقرب إلى، فكانت هي تؤدي هذا الغرض يعني دون أن تكون بصورة مباشرة.
لم تكن العلاقة على ما يرام بين الإنجليز وفيصل، إذ كانت تتقلب ذات اليمين وذات الشمال بين الطرفين، الأمر الذي أرهق جيترود بيل، فكتبت إلى أبيها تشكو إليه وطأة العمل كمنسقة بين البريطانيين والملك الجديد الذي ساهمت في صنعه، قائلة: لكم أن تعولوا علي في شيء واحد فقط، هو أني لن أشارك أبدا في صنع ملوك مرة أخرى، إنه جهد لا أقوى عليه.
She was making kings with very limited power. Once the king is made, the relationship can't be the same anymore. And I think that's what she began to feel, that as Faisal began to be his own man, his own king, a politician playing a game in Iraq, she could just be one person, and he couldn't devote any more than that. So I think that there was a sense of personal disappointment, possibly, or at least, if not that, personal grief, that in creating the king and the kingdom, she created something over which she had no longer control, and which was pushing her, this time, more and more to the margins.
Faisal was put in a very, very difficult position. On the one hand, he himself, I think, was genuinely interested in helping the Iraqis and helping build an independent Iraq. Somebody described him, I think Sir Percy Cox described him as showing the devil's hoof or something like that. Some sort of expression that meant he was a devil in disguise or something. Don't trust him. At the same time as wanting to be more independent, he knew that he relied on the British army, basically, and Air Force in particular, because by this time the British had largely removed a lot of their Air Force, their army, and replaced it with bombers. And he was sort of dependent on the British for protection, and also for collecting taxes, without which his government couldn't function. It's correct to say that no, the relationship between him and Sir Percy Cox was not great, and I think that continued until with Sir Percy Cox's replacements later and right up to his death.
مع مضي الوقت كان الملك فيصل يبسط نفوذه على الدولة العراقية أكثر فأكثر، فباتت الحاجة إلى جيترود واستشاراتها السياسية تتضاءل شيئا فشيئا، فاختط كل منهما طريقه للعمل في مفاصل الدولة العراقية الحديثة.
أراد بطريقة هادئة ودبلوماسية أن يبعدها عن صناعة القرار السياسي العراقي بدون أن يعني، فلهذا أنه أعطاها مهمة أخرى، يعني أنه قبل المتحف أيضا هناك شيء مهم، هي أيضا أسست المكتبة الوطنية العراقية National Library، قبلها أسست يعني ما يسمى مكتبة السلام، اللي لاحقا في 60 تحولت إلى المكتبة الوطنية العراقية.
But she began to feel that she was becoming sidelined away from where power was, and she was a very strong-minded woman, and I think power quite appealed to her, but she found herself being consulted less and less. She also, one way of dealing with this was to take up a new project, which was, as I'm sure you know, the creation of the Iraqi Archaeological Museum, which was, I think, in my opinion, her greatest triumph.
I think in many ways she realised, she was quite realistic, that her task was done, that the king didn't want advice from her, and the British had gone their own way, now dealing with a king, with a parliamentary life, a different kind of political life was emerging. And I think that she felt in many ways that her role in the founding of Iraq couldn't be simply routinized into somebody who was still going to be there. And yet she loved Iraq and wanted to stay there, so she devoted herself to the preservation of antiquities. And one thing that she did, you could argue, which was hugely favourable to Iraq, was to make sure that the antiquities law that was passed by the Iraqis government, that the British, in a sense, had to accept because they had created the Iraqi government, was very favourable to Iraq. So the notion that Iraq would just be a kind of free-for-all in which people could take whatever they wanted, and the British in particular, could no longer be the case, had to be regulated. Of course there were shares, and it was worked out, so British expeditions got a certain share, so did others. It was regularised, and I think that she felt that was one of her greatest contributions to preserving the archaeological heritage of Iraq. That and the founding of the Iraq Museum, which she was very influential and helpful in creating something that, again, comes out of her love of not only Iraq, but of what she thinks Iraq means in history.
مع بلوغها النصف الثاني من عقدها الخمسيني من العمر، كانت النوائب تتهاوى على جيترود بيل من كل حد وصوب، الأمر الذي اضطرها أن تسافر إلى بريطانيا لتقف على أحوال عائلتها المادية المتدهورة، وتشد من أزر أبيها الذي فجع بموت ابنه الوحيد وشقيقها الأصغر موريس بيل. لكن وفاة أخيها موريس لم تكن آخر فاجعة تصيب الأب الذي فقد ابنته جيترود بيل بعد فترة وجيزة من عودتها إلى بغداد في ظروف غامضة اختلفت فيها الروايات.
ولدتها الغنية فجأة تتعرض إلى نكسة كبيرة مادية وتفقد معظم ممتلكاتهم أثر كثيرا على حياتها. وقبلها بفترة قصيرة أخوها أيضا يعني توفي بالتايفويد يعني شقيقها. هذه الأمور، ولكن مسألة يعني انتحارها من عدمه لأنها هي أوصت يعني وصيفتها أو مساعدتها بأنه يا فلانة أقضيني غدا في الساعة كذا، في الساعة 10 صباحا. فلا يعني يتوقع أن شخص يقدم على الانتحار يطلب من شخص آخر أن ينقذه يعني. ولكن ربما هذه ما يسمى الجرعة الزائدة، ولكن هي كانت يعني تشعر بأنه نوع من الاكتئاب يعني أصيبت فيه، ونوع من الحالة الصحية كلها ربما ساعدت هذه العوامل.
She basically suggested to one of the British officers in Baghdad, who she greatly admired, that they might get married. And tragically, well, for her, he actually turned her down. He said, "No, I don't want to get married to you." And by this time she was in her 50s, you know. And it seems as though that may have been one of the factors that led to her suicide in 1926.
There was also the question of the unhappinesses that she had suffered in personal relationships in one form or another with people that at one point she thought she was going to marry and then they're breaking up or then dying. And there's aspects of that. I mean, not immediately before she died, but obviously her loneliness, as people talked about it, was something. The second, I think a third thing there is also, what was it like to be a woman of such prominence but without family in Baghdad? And it was quite difficult when you look at the ways in which the British sometimes talked about her, let alone the Iraqis. You realise that wasn't an easy position to be in.
رغم تضارب الأقاويل حول سيرة حياتها أو حتى قصة مماتها، إلا أن الثابت في الأمر هو أن جيرترود بيل هي أول من رسم حدود العراق الحديث وتوج أول ملك عليه، ناهيك عن تشييد المكتبة الوطنية والمتحف الوطني العراقي، وتنهي بذلك رحلة استمرت 57 عاماً.